Hey there, friend. Thanks so much for taking a moment to watch this video. It really does mean a lot. And if you feel like subscribing, that would honestly make my day. Now, let me introduce myself. I'm Kevin. If you've ever been in a relationship where you're constantly trying to guess how your partner feels, or waiting anxiously for a reply that might never come, then this story might feel all too familiar. Stick with me, because I'm going to share how saying yes to just being friends ended up being one of the best choices I didn't know I needed to make. But to really understand that, we've got to rewind to when things started to crack. Barbara and I had been dating for about 8 months when I noticed something was off. Whenever we had a disagreement, nothing major, maybe I forgot to check in before making weekend plans with my buddies, she wouldn't talk about it. Instead, she'd shut down completely. Since we lived in different parts of town, that silence came in the form of ignored texts, missed calls, and social media posts where she was out having fun, with no sign I even existed. At first, I assumed she just needed time to cool off. I figured she was hurt, so I gave her a little breathing room. The next day, I reached out with a message, apologized, and asked if we could talk. No response. On day 2, I tried calling, straight to voicemail. By the 3rd day, I was falling apart, replaying everything I'd said, trying to figure out what had been so terrible. I know how that might sound. But when someone who means a lot to you suddenly acts like you've vanished, it seriously messes with your head. On the 4th day, right when I felt like I might cave and start apologizing for things I hadn't even done, she finally texted, as if nothing had happened. Just a casual, "How's your day?" No mention of the silence. No explanation for the freeze-out. Just a reset to normal. And I was so relieved to hear from her that I didn't dare ask why she'd disappeared. That became our routine. Every few weeks, something would upset her. Half the time, I didn't even know what it was, and she'd ghost me for days. I'd tear myself up inside, wondering what I'd missed, trying to piece together the puzzle. Then, just like clockwork, she'd pop back in with no context, acting like things were fine. And I'd be so grateful for the calm that I ignored how wrong it all felt. The worst part. I started altering who I was just to avoid conflict. I'd hesitate to make plans. I'd pocket my phone the moment she walked in. I began agreeing with things I didn't actually believe, just to keep things smooth. I was walking on eggshells in my own relationship, but I couldn't see it at the time. One of the drawbacks of dating someone who lives across the city is that when things go wrong, you can't just sit face to face and work it out. You're stuck with texts and phone calls, like trying to tune a piano wearing boxing gloves. I'll never forget one argument in particular. It was so small, it's almost laughable now. We were supposed to grab lunch one weekend. I suggested this sandwich place we'd been to before, and she said it sounded good. But once we got there, something felt off. Barely glancing at me, she said I always picked the same boring places. I reminded her that she had agreed to go. Her response: "Just because I said it was fine doesn't mean I wanted to go." That was the kind of logic I was up against. How was I supposed to know fine actually meant no, but don't ask me why? The entire lunch was strained. I tried making small talk, but it didn't land. When I asked if she wanted to hang out afterward, she told me she already had plans with her roommate. I offered her a ride. She said she'd take an Uber. That was Friday. That night she stopped answering texts again. No response Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I sent a handful of messages asking if we could clear the air, saying I felt like there'd been a misunderstanding. Tuesday morning she messaged like nothing had happened. Said she'd just been busy with work and asked if I wanted to grab dinner later in the week. No mention of the tension, no acknowledgement of 3 days of silence, just a dinner invite like everything was peachy. And I went along with it, because I was exhausted, tired of the guessing games, the emotional tightrope, and the guilt I couldn't explain. By then, any version of her that wasn't cold or distant felt like a win. After nearly 2 years together, I was emotionally drained. It felt like I'd spent all that time holding my breath. Seeing her name pop up on my screen didn't make me happy anymore. It filled me with dread, Would it be a sweet text? Or something that sent me spiraling again? Friends started asking why I always seemed stressed. I didn't know how to explain that I felt like I was constantly being tested and failing without knowing the rules. The final big fight? It was over something so minor, I still can't believe it happened. We were texting about weekend plans, and I mentioned I might go to my cousin's birthday party Saturday night. Her reply? A simple okay no emoji. Nothing, and I knew that okay didn't mean okay. So I called her, asked if something was bothering her. She said no. I told her it sounded like something was off. She snapped back, asking why I was trying to make a problem where there wasn't one. And just like that, I became the problem. Suddenly, I was the one stirring up drama. I told her I wasn't trying to fight. I just wanted to be sure we were good. She insisted everything was fine, but her tone said otherwise. I felt like I'd already lost. I just didn't know the reason yet. I asked if she wanted to come to the party with me, wondering if maybe that was the issue. She replied that she wasn't invited. I explained it was a casual family thing, no invitation needed. She cut me off and told me to go have fun at my party. Then she hung up. That was on Wednesday. By Thursday, she'd gone quiet again. Nothing on Friday. Saturday arrived, and I was so anxious I almost didn't go, but I went and spent the entire night checking my phone, coming up with excuses about why she wasn't there. My relatives kept asking where Barbara was, and I had no real answer. Sunday passed, then Monday, then Tuesday. Still silence, but honestly, I wasn't even angry anymore. I felt numb. On Wednesday evening, she finally texted me, said she wanted to stop by after work the next day because we need to talk. My stomach dropped. In our 2 years together, those 4 words had never led to anything good. Still, part of me was relieved. At least she was communicating. Thursday felt endless. I kept glancing at the clock, counting down until she'd be off work and making the 20-minute drive to my place. At exactly 6:47 p.m., I heard her knock. I remember the time because I'd been sitting there watching the minutes crawl by. I opened the door, and she looked completely worn out. I said, "Hey," quietly. She echoed it back, barely meeting my eyes. I told her the door was open. She stepped inside and perched on the edge of the couch, still in her office clothes, clutching her purse like she wasn't planning to stay long. I took a seat by the window and asked what was going on. For a while, she didn't say a word, her gaze fixed on her fingers, unmoving. Then, after a long pause, she said she'd been thinking about us, about the direction things were heading. I let her speak. Finally, she said she thought it was best if we just stayed friends. And strangely enough, my first reaction wasn't pain. It wasn't anger or devastation or even surprise. What I felt was relief. I looked at her and said, "All right." She blinked and looked up like she hadn't expected me to take it so calmly. Maybe she thought I'd beg her to reconsider or demand an explanation. She repeated what I said, this time like she wasn't sure she'd heard me right. I said it again. "Yeah, all right." After months of walking carefully, trying to decode her moods, sitting through silence that lasted days, and constantly feeling like I was letting someone I loved down, it was finally done. She asked if I wasn't upset. I took a second to check in with myself. Was there sadness? Sure. We'd had good times. There were things I'd miss about her. But more than anything, I felt a deep, quiet release. I told her I was worn out. Worn down by the feeling that I was always making a misstep, exhausted by the uncertainty, never knowing if she'd greet me with warmth or ice me out for days. Just tired of the whole dynamic. She nodded after a moment and said it seemed like we wanted different things from life. I told her I agreed. She hung around for another 10 minutes. We talked about the practical stuff. Her hoodies at my place, a few of my books still at hers. The typical back and forth that happens when a relationship ends. When she left, I sat there in the quiet and felt something I hadn't felt in far too long. Peace. The next few weeks were a little strange. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to send her a meme or thinking of texting her when I saw a trailer for a movie she'd love. But mostly, I felt lighter. I started seeing my friends again without the tension of wondering if Barbara would be upset that I hadn't invited her or that I was staying out too long. I wasn't overanalyzing every word I said, worrying whether something harmless might be twisted into a slight. About a month after the breakup, I ran into Amanda at a coffee shop downtown. Amanda had been Barbara's roommate back in college. They'd lived together during junior year and stayed in occasional contact afterward. I'd met Amanda plenty of times during my relationship with Barbara. She was always the kind of person who made things feel easy, sharp, chill, and free of drama. She smiled when she saw me in line and asked how I'd been. I said I was doing well and realized I wasn't lying. I asked how she was holding up. She told me work was chaotic, but nothing she couldn't handle. We grabbed a table and spent some time catching up. Eventually, the conversation turned to the breakup. She asked how I was handling everything. I told her honestly that it had been the right call. Barbara and I just weren't a good fit. Amanda nodded and said sometimes two people simply don't work. No one's at fault, it just doesn't mesh. What I appreciated was that she didn't try to trash Barbara or take a side. She just acknowledged how complicated relationships can be. We talked for close to an hour. She mentioned she was working as a graphic designer at a marketing firm and thinking about freelancing. I told her about a new project I was managing. As we got up to leave, she suggested we grab coffee again sometime. I told her I'd enjoy that. Over the next few weeks, Amanda and I started hanging out more often. Sometimes it was coffee, other times lunch. Once in a while, we'd catch a movie or try a new place to eat. Being with her felt easy. She said what she meant, didn't play games. If I proposed an alternate plan, she'd either stick with hers or agree that mine sounded better. There were no hidden meanings, no cold silences over something trivial like choosing one cuisine over another. I genuinely liked being around her. She had this way of cracking jokes at just the right moment. Sharp, funny, always unexpected. Was I attracted to her? Definitely. Amanda was beautiful, tall, dark-haired, with those vivid green eyes you notice right away. But I wasn't looking for anything serious, and I didn't get the sense she was either. We were just two people enjoying each other's company, no pressure. I should mention that Amanda and Barbara still kept in touch. Not closely, but they'd text every now and then or see each other at mutual events. I wasn't hiding what was going on between Amanda and me, but I wasn't exactly posting about it either. If someone asked, I would have told them. Around 3 months into our friendship, Amanda and I were browsing the stalls at a farmer's market on a Saturday morning when I spotted someone who looked familiar. I turned for a better look. It was Jen, one of Barbara's co-workers. I'd seen her a few times back when I used to pick Barbara up after work events. Jen saw me too. She gave me a quick wave and I nodded back. Just a simple acknowledgement between acquaintances. I didn't think much of it. But that evening my phone rang, and Barbara's name showed up on the screen. For a second I considered ignoring it. We hadn't talked since the breakup, but curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. She asked how I'd been. Her tone was different. Something in it felt unfamiliar. I told her I was doing all right and asked what made her call. She said someone told her they'd seen me at the market the day before. No chit-chat. She got straight to it. I told her yes, I'd been there and added that I was with Amanda because I already knew where this was headed. She didn't respond right away. Then she repeated Amanda's name like she needed to hear it out loud. I said yeah. She asked if it had been a date. I could have explained, told her it wasn't like that Amanda and I were just hanging out. But honestly, that wasn't her concern anymore. I told her we'd been spending time together. She said, right, and hesitated before admitting she hadn't known. I said it had been a few weeks now. She echoed a few weeks under her breath and then asked if we could meet, grab dinner sometime that week. There it was. After all this time, after she'd been the one to walk away, now she wanted to reconnect. I told her I didn't think that was wise. She asked why not, reminding me that we'd agreed to stay friends. I said we were friends, but that didn't mean we had to rehash old feelings over a meal. Then she asked if I was seriously going to date her friend. That's when it clicked. Barbara hadn't changed. Even now, she was trying to rewrite the story, trying to guilt me for moving forward. I told her calmly that I wasn't dating Amanda, but even if I was, that decision no longer involved her. I reminded her that she had chosen to end things. She said she understood, but her voice faded off. I asked her to explain herself. She had been the one to end the relationship. So what right did she have to be upset about what I did afterward? She hesitated, staying silent for a few seconds, then quietly admitted it felt weird that I was spending time with Amanda. I clarified that I hadn't chased anything. Amanda and I ran into each other by coincidence, and from that point on, we simply began hanging out. There was nothing more to it. She responded with a dull "right," wished me well, and ended the call. I sat holding the phone, waiting to feel something. Maybe guilt. Maybe sadness. But what washed over me instead was that same quiet stillness I'd felt the night she suggested we remain friends. It was further confirmation that letting go had been the right move. In the weeks that followed, Barbara began a slow, subtle effort to insert herself into the space between Amanda and me. It started when Amanda offhandedly mentioned that Barbara had reached out to her out of the blue. Amanda said Barbara had invited her to lunch, which struck her as odd, considering they hadn't spent time alone in ages. I asked what they ended up talking about. Amanda stirred her coffee thoughtfully before answering. Most of the conversation, she said, had revolved around her. How her job was going, her love life, the usual small talk. But eventually, the topic shifted. Barbara started bringing me up. I asked Amanda to explain. She told me Barbara had inquired about our relationship, how often we saw each other, whether I ever brought her up, and if there was anything romantic between us. Amanda told her the truth, that we were just friends, and that I seemed to be doing well. Apparently, Barbara didn't look thrilled with that response. Not long after, Amanda brought up another encounter. Barbara had messaged her about a party coming up that weekend, but instead of sticking to party plans, the chat veered into a monologue about our breakup. I asked Amanda what Barbara had said. She told me Barbara had painted me as controlling, claiming I didn't like her being around other men and got jealous whenever she interacted with male friends. Let me be clear. None of that ever happened. Barbara always had guy friends, and I never once objected to it. If anything, I was the one trying to meet new people and expand our social circle. She was usually the one who seemed uncomfortable when I connected with others. Amanda also said Barbara claimed I was still trying to get back together with her, that I kept reaching out, calling and texting repeatedly. I handed Amanda my phone and showed her the full thread. The last message I'd sent was 3 months prior, just to ask when I could return a few of her belongings. Amanda scrolled through the texts, then glanced at me and said she had already suspected Barbara's version didn't add up. I asked her why. She said the story didn't match the person she knew me to be. She couldn't picture me flooding someone's inbox or acting possessive. On top of that, she said Barbara's tone during those conversations seemed oddly rehearsed, like she was repeating a script. And for the next 2 weeks, the pattern continued. Barbara kept finding new excuses to reach out to Amanda, but somehow, every conversation found its way back to me, framing me as a toxic ex, accusing me of using Amanda to trigger jealousy. She tried to paint it as if Amanda were just a pawn in my plan for revenge, that I wasn't genuinely interested in her, that I was just trying to make a point. Amanda eventually started taking screenshots and sending them to me, not to start drama, but because the claims were growing so outlandish they bordered on absurd. At one point, Barbara even claimed I was only spending time with Amanda to get back at her, that revenge was just the kind of man I was. I read through those messages. Barbara had sent Amanda paragraphs detailing all the ways I was allegedly manipulative, claiming I was petty, vindictive, emotionally unstable. I turned to Amanda and admitted that if this had happened 8 months earlier, I'd probably be shattered by it all. Back then, I might have fallen apart, called Barbara in tears, and begged her to stop slandering me. I would have desperately tried to prove to her and everyone else that I wasn't the villain she was painting me to be. Amanda asked how I felt about it now. I told her I was just relieved that Barbara was showing her true colors so clearly. Amanda chuckled and said, "She's not exactly doing herself any favors." That should have been the end of it. Barbara had taken her shot. It didn't land. That could have been the conclusion. But life rarely offers such tidy endings. A month later, something else came to light, something that completely reshaped how I viewed everything that had happened. I was at a friend's birthday gathering when I bumped into some mutual acquaintances, people Barbara and I had known, though never particularly closely. One of them immediately asked me where Barbara was. I told them we had split some time ago. They looked surprised, like it was news to them. We made some small talk, and then I moved on to mingle with others. The party went on like any other. But the following day, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The caller introduced himself. It was one of the people I'd spoken to at the party. We got to chatting, and at one point he asked if I missed Barbara. I told him the truth. I wasn't happy about spending 2 years in a relationship that ended up being so hollow. Then he said something that caught me completely off guard. He told me not to feel too bad, because even during our relationship, Barbara hadn't been entirely faithful. He claimed she'd been seeing another guy behind my back and only ended things with me once her side relationship started getting more serious. That, he added, hadn't lasted. She and the other guy broke up just a few months after we did. I didn't know how to respond. He told me I should be glad it ended when it did, that Barbara hadn't been worth all the effort I gave her. I thanked him for being honest and ended the call. Deep down, I'd always had an uneasy feeling about it, but I never really wanted to confront it. Barbara hadn't suggested being friends out of emotional clarity or mutual respect. She did it because she already had someone else in play and wanted to keep me close, just in case that new thing didn't work out. I wasn't exactly happy to learn this, but I wasn't devastated either. I just felt clear. With that new clarity, I started asking questions, talking to people who still interacted with her. Slowly, the bigger picture came into focus. Barbara's fixation on Amanda hadn't been about lingering feelings. It had been about maintaining control. She left thinking I'd be frozen in place, waiting, uncertain, emotionally available whenever she decided she might want me again. But when her new relationship collapsed and she saw that I had moved on, that I wasn't stuck, she panicked. The lunch invite? That was a test. The whispers to Amanda. A calculated attempt to sabotage anything meaningful I might be building. She had hoped she could still find a way back into my life by poisoning any new connection I formed. It all made sense once I stopped seeing her actions as emotional and started viewing them as strategic. In my view, here's what happened. Barbara emotionally checked out long before the breakup, but she wasn't ready to fully let go of the security I provided. Not until she was certain her next option was solid. So when she suggested we stay friends, what she really meant was, don't move on, I might still need you. And when her safety net failed, when I didn't come running back, she turned to disruption. She tried to blow up anything new in my life so she could keep her influence intact. It was manipulative. It was deliberate. But it was also deeply human. People make selfish, tangled decisions when they're afraid of being left behind. When I laid everything out for Amanda, every detail I'd pieced together, her reaction was exactly what I'd come to expect from her. Direct, sincere, and refreshingly blunt. She said it finally cleared up something that had been nagging at her. Namely, why Barbara had gone out of her way to convince her I was some kind of manipulative villain. Because really, if Barbara had truly moved on and we were just casual acquaintances, what reason did she have to badmouth me? I asked Amanda what she made of the whole mess. She thought about it for a second, then said she didn't think Barbara was some terrible person, but she clearly wasn't in the emotional space to be in a real, healthy relationship. Amanda told me I was lucky I got out when I did. I asked if she regretted getting caught up in all the drama. She looked at me and laughed, like the question itself was absurd. "Are you kidding?" she said. "This has been more entertaining than anything I've streamed this year." That was Amanda for you, able to find levity in the chaos without ever being unkind. Then she said something that hadn't occurred to me. She said, in a strange twist, Barbara had accidentally brought us closer together. I raised an eyebrow and asked her what she meant. Amanda explained that all of Barbara's scheming, all her efforts to make me look bad, had backfired. If her worst accusation was a made-up narrative, then it revealed more about her than it ever did about me. And honestly, Amanda had a point. That experience, messy as it was, taught me a few things about love, relationships, and myself that I wish I'd learned a long time ago. The first thing, when someone shows you their character, trust what you see the first time. Barbara gave me a glimpse during our first major conflict, vanishing for 4 days instead of addressing it. But I let it slide, convincing myself there was an explanation instead of accepting the truth in front of me. Second, solid relationships don't require emotional tightrope walking. With Barbara, I was constantly analyzing, bracing for her reactions, trying to prevent another cold shoulder or drawn-out silence. With Amanda, I could just be. I knew that if something was wrong, she'd simply say so. Third lesson, sometimes the kindest gift someone can give you is walking away. I spent 2 exhausting years trying to mend something with Barbara that was broken from the start. And once she ended things, I felt lighter, more free, and, for the first time in ages, genuinely happy. Fourth, when someone tries to cut you off from others, it's not affection, it's control. Barbara's efforts to undermine my friendship with Amanda weren't about love. They were about shrinking my world down to a size that suited her. It wasn't concern, it was manipulation. And lastly, agreeing to stay friends with someone, even after romantic tension, can turn out to be the smartest move you didn't plan. So where does everything stand now? Barbara and I haven't spoken since. There's no animosity, but there's no connection either. We're just 2 people who dated once and then quietly drifted in opposite directions. Amanda and I still talk. We catch up when we can, trade texts here and there, grab coffee when schedules match. There hasn't been anything romantic, not yet anyway, but if it ever did head in that direction, I'd be open to it. Still, I'm in no rush. Healing from a toxic relationship is like stepping out of a sealed room. You don't realize how desperately you needed fresh air until you finally get to breathe again. Being with Barbara had felt normal only because I didn't know what healthy looked like. But time spent with Amanda, where there's no hidden edge to our conversations, where making plans doesn't lead to fights, where I'm not bracing for mood swings, revealed to me what peace actually feels like. I'm not trying to paint Amanda as perfect or pretend our friendship is some fairy tale. Life doesn't work that way. But what we have is real. It's calm. It's honest. And after years of emotional turbulence, that kind of simplicity feels revolutionary. If you're in a relationship where you constantly watch your words, unsure of who your partner will be from one day to the next, if even casual conversations feel like navigating a minefield, don't ignore that gut feeling. That unease is your warning. Red flags don't mean try harder, they mean step back. Don't let your idea of love make room for mistreatment. Don't shrink to fit into someone else's chaos. And don't confuse instability with passion, or think that drama equals depth. Maybe Barbara thought she was being clever when she suggested we stay friends as a way to keep the door slightly ajar. But what she really did was give me a way out, a chance to experience what a truly supportive connection feels like. And with that, our chapter comes to a close. Drop your thoughts in the comments if this resonated. Thanks for sticking with me. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to check out the others on the channel. Until next time, take care, my friend.